information about the FAFSA. They are 10 times more knowledgeable than me about the FAFSA because they deal with these kinds of things every single day. So if you have questions about the process, please feel free to ask them tonight. But with that, I guess I'd like to introduce Laura Lang from Lakeland and Shepherd State.
Hi everyone, thank you for coming. Let me know if I'm too loud or too quiet, and we can go from there. But as Denise said, I'm Laura Lang. I work at Lakeland University, and tonight we're going to go through the financial aid process for the 2019-20 academic year. And this presentation is going to be kind of broken up into two parts. The first half is going to be all about what financial aid is, so you know exactly what the different types of aid your student might be eligible for. And then the second part is the actual application process. So we have screenshots of the FAFSA form. So we kind of walk through it together so you can visualize what it looks like when it's time for you to complete the form online yourself. Okay, so these are the topics we'll discuss in the first half. So what is financial aid? We'll define the cost of attendance, the expected family contribution, financial need. We'll go through the different categories, types, and sources of aid. We'll discuss special circumstances, and we'll do the FAFSA walkthrough. So what is financial aid? Financial aid consists of funds that are provided to students and families to help pay for post-secondary expenses. Now, there's a variety of different types and sources, and it all depends on the student's FAFSA results. But before we can determine the types of financial aid, we have to determine what the school's cost of attendance is. Every school has a published cost of attendance that includes their direct costs that you might see on their bill, and then their indirect costs. So direct costs are things like tuition and fees, room and board, that's your housing and meal plan, and then books and supplies. Now some schools, they might charge books and supplies as part of a fee on your student bill, and some schools, they might not charge books and you're on your own to purchase books. So it's important to ask your school to know ahead of time if you need to plan for books on your own or if it can be rolled into your bill. And then the indirect costs are things like transportation and miscellaneous expenses that aren't going to be billed to you, but they're things that you should plan for because you're still going to have other expenses while you're in school. The expected family contribution is the measurement of the students' and families' ability to pay for post-secondary educational expenses. So, key word there is that it is a measurement, and it's the measurement of the family's ability to pay, not necessarily willingness, and it's not necessarily the true amount that you're actually going to pay, but it's the number that schools are required to use to determine the student's financial aid eligibility. And it's broken into two components, the student contribution and the parent contribution. So between the two of those, we look at one number, that's the expected family contribution. So to get to financial need, we take that total cost of attendance, subtract the expected family contribution, and that is the student's financial need. So the greater the financial need, the more likely you'll receive more different types of financial aid. There's two different categories of aid. There's need-based financial aid and non-need-based financial aid. So to qualify for need-based, you must show financial need as according to that formula we just went through. And then non-need-based financial need isn't even a factor. So that would be things like scholarships and different types of loans. There are 4 types of financial aid broken into 2 subcategories. So the first on the right side is gift aid, so scholarships and grants. Those are both types of free money, so that's money that you do not have to repay. So the more gift aid you receive, the better. And then on the left side is aid called self-help. So on the bottom there's work, study, employment. So that's where the student would obtain a job, they would get a paycheck, and then they could use those earnings to help pay for their expenses. Loans is another type of self-help aid. So it's money that the student or parent can receive and borrow, but it does need to be repaid when the student graduates. And typically that's 6 months after the student graduates or would leave school. We're going to go into each category here in a little bit more detail now. So scholarships is free money that is awarded to everyone, and there's scholarships out there for everything. So this is something that we really like to stress to students, especially now while you still have 2 to 4 years of time to apply for these scholarships. They're awarded based on things like merit, or your academics, your skills, interests and hobbies, what you participate in, what your career goals are, and different weird characteristics about you. So if you're a left-handed poet, there's probably a scholarship out there for you. So we like to say that you should think of applying for scholarships as like a part-time job. You can start it now already, and you can do it all the way through until you graduate. What's nice is you have the time now, because after you graduate, no one's going to give you a scholarship to help pay for your loans, but they will give you a scholarship while you're in school to help pay for school. Grants, again, that's free money. This is need-based financial aid. So you do have to show financial need as according to that formula in order to qualify for a grant. For study employment, again, this is when a student gets a job on campus and can use those earnings towards their education. Now, most colleges allow students to automatically deduct their payroll earnings from their tuition bill. So if you have an outstanding balance and you get a job on campus, you can say, hey, I want 50, 75% of my paycheck to just go directly towards my bill. And then loans. Loans, we say last. You can try and get as much as the other 3 types of financial aid as possible, and if you need to, then you can borrow loan money and repay it back at a later date. There are 5 different sources of financial aid. It can come from private sources, employers, the federal government, states, and colleges and universities. The federal government is by far the largest source of financial aid. It is aid awarded primarily on the basis of financial need, like that formula we showed earlier. Every year, students have to apply for this type of aid by doing the FAFSA form. And eligibility requirements must be met. So those are things like you have to be a citizen of the United States. If you're a male, age 18 or older, you have to be registered with the Selective Service. You can't have any drug crimes or anything like that. So those are the types of eligibility requirements. This is a chart of the different federal student aid programs. So this is where that handout that Denise handed out is really helpful. The federal Pell Grant is the grant that is awarded based on financial need. You have to show a very high level of need in order to qualify for this grant. Iraq-Afghanistan Service Grant, this is if you have a relative who died in service on or after 9/11. The Federal Supplemental Educational Opportunity Grant, FSCOG, you have to, in most cases, be eligible for the federal Pell Grant in order to qualify for the SEOG. The SEOG depends on the school you go to, because schools are given a certain dollar amount of SEOG funds depending on the size of the school. So if you get Pell, you're not necessarily guaranteed SEOG, but the earlier you apply for financial aid, the more likely that if you get Pell, you would also get this SEOG from your school. So it's good to apply early. The Teacher Education Assistance for College and Higher Education Grant, TEACH grant, this is a grant that is available for teachers, but there are very specific requirements that go along with it. So it's one that you want to be a little bit cautious with, because if you don't follow all of those requirements, this grant can be changed into a loan that you would have to repay. Federal Work Study, again, this is working on campus and getting paid, but you'd be getting paid from the government instead of the school that you're going to. Federal Direct Student Loans. So the government offers 2 types of student loans, subsidized loans and unsubsidized loans. In order to qualify for the subsidized loans, the student does need to show financial need, and the interest on the subsidized loans does not accrue until after the student graduates and enters repayment. Unsubsidized loans, you don't have to show any financial need to qualify for, but the interest does begin to accrue on those loans right away. And then the last type of aid that the government offers is the Federal Plus Loan. This is a loan that is available for parents. It's a federal loan, so it has the same type of repayment options that the student loans have, but this is a loan that is in the parent's name. Now, the interest rate for 2018-19 for the student subsidized and unsubsidized loans is 5.05%. For the Federal Plus Loan, it's 7.6%. We don't know what it's going to be yet for 2019-20. They change every year. But whatever interest rate you get, it's going to stay fixed for the life of the loan. Now, states are another big source of financial aid. There are certain residency requirements that apply. Oftentimes they're awarded based on financial need and merit, so again, those academics. They use information from the FAFSA results primarily. Now, some states might also have their own independent applications that you might need to look into, and the deadlines vary by the state. Now, one important thing to note about the Wisconsin State Grant is that they have a very old software system. So if you want to be considered for this grant, you must list a Wisconsin school within the first 4 schools that you list on your FAFSA. So if you're planning on not even going to a Wisconsin school, just list any Wisconsin school in the first 4. So just in case you go to a Wisconsin school, you might be considered for that state grant. The order that you list schools on the FAFSA doesn't matter. Schools can't actually see what other schools you list, so to them, they're your first choice. Colleges and universities also offer financial aid. Oftentimes, again, it's based on merit and financial need. It can be gift aid or self-help aid, so that would be working on campus, or some colleges have their own loans that they can offer to students. They use information from the FAFSA results, and they also might have their own institutional applications. So again, check with the schools you're going to see if they have any of their own applications that you need to do. And then deadlines and application requirements vary by the institution. So fall is a very big time to be applying for financial aid at a lot of colleges. The FAFSA application opens on October 1st, so you'll want to be doing that this fall. And a lot of colleges have their scholarship deadlines due in the fall as well. So look at the schools that you're interested in and see if they have any scholarship opportunities and when those deadlines are, because you don't want to miss out on any opportunities. There are private sources of financial aid, so this can be private scholarships, grants, and loans. It can come from foundations, businesses, churches, civic and charitable organizations. Deadlines and applications vary, but you can begin researching these private sources now already. A lot of scholarship opportunities when you're not a freshman anymore often come from private sources. A lot of colleges don't necessarily have a bunch of new scholarships every year for returning students, so you're really going to want to focus in on some private opportunities your sophomore, junior, and senior year. But another option right now is to check with your high school. So check with the counselor, see if there's any local opportunities for scholarships that you can apply for as well. Employers is another source of aid. So companies might have their own scholarships available for children of employees. So parents, you can check with your employer and see if there's any scholarship opportunities for your students. And then they might also have educational benefits for their employees. So students, if you have a job, check with your employer and see if they offer any sort of tuition discounts or scholarships or anything like that. Okay, so to apply for all this wonderful type of aid, you have to do the FAFSA application. The FAFSA collects both demographic and financial information for both the student and the parent. That information is then used to calculate the expected family contribution, and then colleges use that EFC to award the financial aid. And this application is available in both English and Spanish. The FAFSA opens October 1st. For the 2019-20 academic year, it opens October 1st, and it's going to ask for 2017 tax information and it's not going to ask you to go back in and change anything. So you can do it this fall, do your 2017 taxes, and you're done. A lot of colleges have the FAFSA filing deadlines, so it doesn't necessarily mean that if you miss it, you can't apply, but they're more so priority deadlines. But you should still check with each school to see what their priority deadline might be. There's 5 different places that you can actually complete the FAFSA, but I'm only really going to talk about the first 2 because these are the most common and the most efficient way to get them done. So the first one is FAFSA on the web. So if you go online to fafsa.gov, that's fafsa.gov, that brings you to a website where you can just complete it online. That's been the way it has been for a very, very long time. And now just this summer, there was big news in the financial aid world. They actually released an app called My Student Aid that you can download on your tablet or on your phone. And you can actually do your FAFSA now from your phone. So that's really exciting for us because not much exciting news happens in financial aid. The other cool thing about the app, and they're going to keep developing it as it gets further along, but you can also track your student loans on this app, so you can see, oh, I've already borrowed this much, this is who my servicer is, so if I want to make a payment, I can do it directly from the app. It's really cool because when it was only the website, you had to go to like 3 other websites to find out how much you borrowed, who your servicer is, and then make a payment. So it's really nice that everything now is in one place. If you have to do it paper or on the phone or have a financial aid administrator do it for you, those options are available, but they take a lot of time, and it's preferred to do it on the website or through the app. If you do it on the website or through the app, there are built-in edits to prevent costly errors. So it's going to catch you if they think you typed in something wrong or added an extra 0. It's going to say, hey, did you want to put that in there? Whereas if you do it the paper version, it's not going to catch those things for you. It also has built-in skip logic that allows parents and students to skip questions that wouldn't necessarily apply to them. So that helps simplify the application and then help it go a little bit quicker. And they also offer the ability to use the IRS data retrieval tool. And this is something built in the FAFSA that allows you to electronically transfer your tax information directly into the FAFSA, so you don't have to grab your tax return and enter everything line by line. So that's a really nice feature. You'll submit your application more timely. It takes 3 to 5 days after you submit the FAFSA for the schools that you entered on it to receive it. There's very detailed instructions for every question. Next to each question, there's going to be a little question mark that you can click on, and it's going to tell you exactly how you should answer that question, so that's helpful. You can check your status online. You can see if it's been processed successfully or if something is holding it up. And they're always working on simplifying the application in the future. So this is what the website looks like. They also did a website facelift too, which was exciting. The first time you go here, you'll log in on the left side as a new user, and then after that, you'll log in on the right side as a returning user. When you log in, you're going to have 2 options. You can either log in as the student on the left or log in as the parent on the right. This is also new and very exciting because they didn't have 2 options before, and oftentimes parents would log in and the FAFSA would think that it's the student, but the parents would think that the questions were asking about them, so we would get FAFSAs that have a bunch of information about the parents that we think is probably wrong. You know, I don't think that the student made $70,000 in 2016, so there's a lot of errors that way that we had to go and contact parents and students to see what we needed to correct. So this should hopefully help. This is what the app looks like, My Student Aid. It's very mobile friendly, and again, you can log in as the parent on the top, as the student in the middle, or as a preparer. A preparer is someone that you would pay to help complete your FAFSA. If you do the FAFSA on the app, your information is protected in the same way that it's protected on the website. It's also going to prompt you to create a save key on both the website and on the app. But basically, like if the student logs in and they start the FAFSA and they have a save key, they can give that save key to the parent and say, okay, please log in and finish the FAFSA now. I've got my part done. This is the save key, so it'll bring the parent directly to where the student left off. The app also has nice little tracking lines here, so you can see how many sections you have to complete, how many sections you have left, and how many you've finished successfully. On the app, you can also do a little digital signature with your finger, which is kind of fun, which you can't do on the computer. After you submit, it'll give you a confirmation that everything was submitted successfully, and it will also give you an estimated EFC calculation so you know what that number is that schools are going to use to calculate your aid. It would also tell you at this point if you're eligible for that federal Pell Grant or not, and about how much. And this EFC that you get is going to be the same number no matter what school you go to. What changes is that cost of attendance and your financial need. This is more information about the IRS data retrieval tool. So if you're eligible to use this, it's going to pop up as you're filling out the FAFSA, and it's going to say, do you want to link to the IRS? And you'll say yes. And then, you don't have to. You can say no thanks, but you have the ability to do this. And if you say yes, it will authenticate your identity by making sure you're logged in with your username and password, and that you are who you say you are, to prevent fraud. It will also, if you decide to link it, it'll transfer all of the data in, but it'll be masked. So you're not going to see any of the tax numbers. It's just going to say transferred from the IRS. And this is to protect your tax information. The last bullet there that says reduces documents requested by financial aid office. There's a 30% chance after you select your FAFSA or after you submit your FAFSA that it would be selected for verification by the Department of Education. If you are, then schools are required to collect additional documentation, such as tax documents from the IRS. But if you use the IRS data retrieval tool, you've already fulfilled that requirement because we know that this came directly from the IRS. So if you are selected for verification, the process becomes a little bit more simple. This chart shows who would maybe not be eligible to use the data retrieval tool. So if you indicated that you didn't file a tax return, if your marital status date was after 2017, if your first 3 digits of your social security number start with 666, if you filed a foreign tax return, if you say that you're married but you filed as head of household or filed married filing separately, you wouldn't be able to use the data retrieval tool. And if neither parent entered a valid social security number, or if non-married parents or both married parents entered all zeros for the social security number. Now, before you can actually finish your FAFSA, you do need to have an FSA ID. The student needs one, and the parent needs one. The FSA ID stands for Federal Student Aid ID. It's your federal username and password. This is the part that you really need to spend a lot of time on. I often get parents and students calling me, and they're like, it's not the FAFSA that's difficult, it's this FSA ID that's giving me all the trouble. And often that's when either the student does the FSA ID for themselves and the parent, or if the parent does the FSA ID for both, things can get messed up. So you have to make sure your name matches exactly how it is on the birth certificate, your social security number is correct, and your date of birth, because after you create your FSA ID, it goes through a lot of database matches to validate your identity. So if you screw it up, it's very difficult to fix. So student creates their own, and parent creates their own, and then keep it somewhere safe so you know where it is, because you're going to need it every year. The The FAFSA is going to ask for some general student information, like the student's social security number, citizenship status, marital status, if they've been convicted for the possession or sale of drugs, if they're selected, or if they're registered with selective service, if they're male and 18, and the highest education level completed by their father or mother. This is only used for certain state programs for their state grants. Student dependency status. So dependency status is what determines whether or not parental information is required on the FAFSA. This has nothing to do with whether or not the student is claimed on the tax return. This is based on the questions that the FAFSA asks. So if the student can answer no to all of the questions, then the student's parents would be required to be on the FAFSA. If they can answer yes to one or more, then they would be considered independent and they would not need to have parental information. So some of those questions are, is the student 24 or older, married, were they an orphan or ward of the court, or an emancipated minor, determined to be a homeless youth by their high school, do they have a child, things like that. So if the student is considered dependent, the parent information will be required, and this is what it asks of parents. So it's going to need tax, income, and other financial information. It's going to ask the parents if they're a dislocated worker, if they've received any means-tested federal benefits in the last 2 years, like SNAP, Medicaid, or SSI, what their asset value is as of the day that you do your FAFSA, and other untaxed income that's not reported on your tax return. The student is going to ask the exact same financial questions. It's also going to ask for additional information from the student, so college information. So here's where you're going to list all of the schools that you want your FAFSA data sent to. You can list up to 10 schools. And remember, Wisconsin schools need to be within the first 4. Your housing plans at each school, so whether you'll live on campus or off campus. And then if you use a preparer, you would have to have the preparer information as well. And then when you're done with the FAFSA, it does require signatures, so you would sign with the FSA IDs that you created for the student and the parent. If for some reason you can't create an FSA ID or it doesn't work, there is the option to print a signature page, sign it, and mail it in. These are some of the FAFSA errors that we see. Social security numbers being wrong, divorced, widowed, remarried, parental information. We do have a handout up here that you can take called Who's My Parent when I fill out my FAFSA, because it can be quite confusing if you're not from a traditional household. So it's going to be very specific as to if your parents are divorced or a widowed situation or remarried, what parent the FAFSA wants you to put on your FAFSA. And then income earned by parents or step-parents. So this is, let's say a parent is divorced in 2017, or they filed their taxes in 2017, married, filing joint, get divorced in 2018, and get remarried in 2019, and you do your FAFSA in 2019, you would say parents are remarried. You'd have 2017 tax information in there, but the ex-spouse would be out, but you'd have to include the new spouse. So this chart helps to explain all of that. Untaxed income, making sure that that's correct. Income taxes paid. Household size is specific as well to who is actually in your household, not necessarily who's all in your family. And then the number of household members in college would just be the children of the household. They don't want to know if any parents are going to college. And then real estate and investment net worth. So sometimes in the asset questions, parents might include the value of their home or their retirement plan, and the FAFSA doesn't want to know that. So again, when you get to those questions, click on that question mark and it will tell you exactly what you're supposed to include. But they don't want you to include the value of the home that you live in as well as your retirement plan. So after the student submits the FAFSA, it will be sent to CPS, the Central Processing System, where they're gonna sift through it and determine that expected family contribution number. And then they're going to send the results to the student and to the colleges that you listed on your FAFSA. The student will receive an email notification of their SAR. So it's a student aid report, and it's going to basically be a printout of all of the questions on the FAFSA and how you answered those questions. The schools receive something called an ISER, an Institutional Student Information Record, and this is where we are told what your expected family contribution is and if your FAFSA was selected to be verified. Now there's a difference between making a correction on your FAFSA and updating your FAFSA. If you did something incorrect, you are required to go back in and make that correction. But if you're not sure, or if you think, I think I should maybe change this, contact the schools, because you are not allowed to update your FAFSA. If you feel that your situation has changed and that your FAFSA should be changed to reflect your current financial situation, schools are allowed to exercise professional judgment and review your situation for special circumstances. So this can be pretty common because you're going to be filling out the FAFSA, let's say in a month, in October. It's going to ask for 2017 tax information, and you're going to be starting school the fall of 2019. Things can happen between now and when you start school, so if anything does, make sure you contact the colleges that you listed and see what kind of documentation they might need from you in order to request a review of your FAFSA for special circumstances. These are just some examples of special circumstances that would qualify. So parent or spouse death, unusual or uncovered medical dental expenses, loss of employment, extraordinary dependent care costs, divorce, secondary school tuition, or for some reason if the student could not obtain parental information. Okay, so now that was the first part about what financial aid is. The next part here is kind of walking through the FAFSA, and we're going to do the screenshots of the FAFSA on the web, so on FAFSA.gov. So after you click login, it looks like this. Student can log in on the left, parent can log in on the right. If this, yep.
Do you do this after you already have your ID number, your FSA ID, or can you do this, does it matter?
It's preferred, so she asked if you can do the FAFSA before you have your FSA ID or if that matters. It's preferred that you would create your FSA ID first and then do the FAFSA. It's going to make it easier too, because if the student logs in with their FSA ID, it's going to pre-populate some of the questions with their social security number and their birthday, so that helps with some of the stuff. If you don't have it, it's fine. You can still get started, but you can't submit it because you have to sign it with your FSA ID.
So where do you go to the FSA?
Good question. On the FAFSA.gov website, there's a little link on the top that says FSA ID, and that's where you would go to create it. Or if you go here and you log in on the top here, it says don't have an FSA ID, you can click there and say create one. Yep.
So when you go on and sign up for that, you get it automatically, you have to wait for something?
It's usually pretty quick. They say it can take 2 to 3 days to verify your identity, but typically you get the verification within that same day. But I guess if you're planning on doing it, I would give yourself 3 days just in case, but usually it's within that first day.
Can you do that before October 1st?
Yes, you can create the FSA ID at any time. Okay. If the parent wants to log in, they would log in with the student's information. So the student's last name, first name, social security number, and date of birth. So here, we're going to be logging in with the student. So here's this fake student's FSA username and password. It's going to have a little disclaimer that you would accept and continue with. And now you're going to have 2 FAFSA options to complete because schools are currently in their 18-19 academic year, but on October 1st, the 2019-20 FAFSA opens. So make sure you look at which one you're completing and that you choose the 2019-20 FAFSA. So then here you would create that save key, so make it something simple. You know, you can do like a 4-digit number, doesn't have to be anything crazy with a bunch of characters. And again, this is if the parent or student starts and wants to log off and have the student continue at a later time, they would need this save key to do that. This is the introductory page, so with some FAQs that you can open like this to read about. And then you get started. So on the top, you can see all of the different sections that are needed to be complete. So the very first one is student demographics. So if the student logs in with their FSA ID, a lot of this will already be pre-populated. If not, you'll have to enter it. So last name, first name, middle initial, SSN, date of birth, your permanent address and email address, residency status, male, female, phone number, and if you have a driver's license, you would put your driver's license information. This is the student's marital status as of the day that they fill out the FAFSA. Are you a U.S. citizen? Are you registered with a selective service? If, and I believe, yeah, so here we said that the student is male. So it's going to ask if they're registered with selective service. If they say they're female, this question isn't even going to pop up. High school completion status, or what it will be when you enter the 2019-20 academic year, what your college grade level will be, and what degree or certificate you are seeking. Are you interested in being considered for work study? So basically, are you interested in having a job on campus? Were you a foster youth or at any time in the foster care system? And then here's the question where it asks, highest level of school completed by parent 1 and parent 2. Have you ever received federal student aid? Yes or no? And then it's going to ask the question if you've been convicted for the possession or sale of drugs. If no, then you are eligible for financial aid. So now that first section we can see is done, student demographics. So now we're on school selection. Yes?
Just going back to selective service,
Mm-hmm.
and you have a stop, so where do we go before we do this to register?
A good question. You can go to the selective service website and register online, or you can have the FAFSA register him for him. So you can say, no, I'm not registered, and then it will say, another question will pop up that says, would you like to register with the selective service now? He can say yes, and then the FAFSA application will do it for him.
So you don't necessarily need to do that ahead of time. You can have them there.
Correct. Yep.
What happens if the student is 18 then?
So at that point, it's okay. For the sophomore year, then he'll have to be registered. Mm-hmm. Did you have a question? Okay. So here is where the student would enter their high school that they're graduating from. And now you're going to be entering the colleges that you want to send the FAFSA results to. So you can either enter the college's school code if you know what it is. If you don't, you can search for the college by their name and the state that they're in. And it's going to ask for your housing plans, so whether you're going to live on campus, off campus, or with your parent. So now school selection is done, and now we're determining the student's dependency status. So these are those yes/no questions. Were you born before January 1st, 1995? As of today, are you married? Are you going for your graduate degree? Do you now have children that receive more than half of your support? Or do you have other dependents who live with you and receive more than half of your support? And then there's some check the boxes, so you would check the boxes if any of these situations would apply to you, and if not, you would say none of the above. Were you homeless, or were you self-supporting and at risk of being homeless? If you say no to all those questions or aren't able to check any of those boxes, then you would be considered dependent and parental information would be required. So dependency status is checked, and now we're on parent demographics. So now on the top, you can see it says parent information. So this is the part now that the parent would be completing. As of today, what is the marital status of your parents? Married or remarried for this example here. And then the date that they got married or remarried. Now here's a little screenshot of that chart that's available up here to determine who your FAFSA parent is. Now enter information for the first parent. So parent social security number, parent last name, first initial, and date of birth. And then you'll have to do the same for the other parent if there's another parent. Parent's email address and their residency information. And now this is a little household size chart. So it's going to say you have two parents, you have yourself, and then here you would enter if there's anyone else in that household, and it calculates your household size for you. And then the bottom is the number of people in that household size that will be in college for the 2019-20 academic year. Okay, so now we're starting to ask about the financial information. So it's going to say, these screenshots are for the 18-19 FAFSA because 19-20 isn't open yet, but it will say, for 2017, have your parents completed their tax return? You would say, already completed in this case. And what was the filing status on the tax return? Married, filing joint? Did your parents file a foreign return? No. If applicable, this little box on the bottom that says link to IRS will pop up for you. So this is where we can just have the tax data transfer in for us. So you'll click link to IRS. Here the parent will enter their FSA ID, the username and password. It's going to give you a little notice that says we're leaving FAFSA on the web to go to the IRS site. This is what the IRS site is going to look like. Now it's going to have your name, social security number, and tax filing status already listed there on the top. What you have to do is enter your address as it would have appeared on your 2017 tax return, and it needs to be exact or it's not going to find your tax information from 2017. So if you put street on your tax return and type ST here, it's not going to find it. So it's helpful to have the tax return out to make sure that you're typing in the address correctly. So here you put in the address. If it finds your tax return, this page here is going to pop up. And then you would check the little box under transfer my tax information into the FAFSA and then transfer now. So then we get back into the FAFSA and you can see that under these questions, there's no number, it says transferred from IRS. For questions that can't get answered from the tax return, they'll be blank. There will be either like a yes or no question, or it's going to be a blank line that they expect you to either enter a number, and that number could be 0, or answer the yes or no question. So all this is transferred from the IRS. So here you can see there's 2 questions that can't be transferred, so you would need to enter either a 0 or what that number is for you. On the third to last question, did the untaxed portion of IRA distributions your father reported for 2017 include rollovers? If it did include rollovers, you would have to say yes and then enter the amount of the rollover. Because otherwise that tax return, all that data is going to transfer into your FAFSA, and it's going to be calculated as an untaxed pension distribution And if it's a rollover, the FAFSA doesn't want to count that. So make sure you pay attention to those questions. Again, more questions to enter information in, so any child support received, housing or food allowances, payments to tax-deferred pensions, and then any other untaxed income not reported, such as workers' comp, disability, etc. And then you can see all those question marks on the side, so if you have any questions about what you should actually put there, click on those and it will give a very detailed explanation of what they're looking for. Now these are the asset questions. So asset questions are all as of the day that you complete your FAFSA. So as of the day that you completed your FAFSA, what was the value or the current balance of cash, savings, and checking? And it might look confusing why it only says fathers right there. We got this from federal student aid, so it started with married parents and now it looks like we just have a father, but if you put in married, it's gonna say the value of your parents' cash, savings, and checking. As of today, what is the net worth of your father or your parents' investments, including real estate? Again, don't include your home. As of today, what is the net worth of your parents' current business and or investment farms? You would not include a family farm that the family lives on or a family business with 100 or fewer full-time equivalent employees. So they do have a little break there for small business owners. Okay, so now the parent financial section is done. Now we're on the student section. So you can see on the top, the little flag says student information. They're going to ask the exact same questions of the student that they asked of the parent. And they can use the IRS data retrieval tool as well if they filed taxes in 2017. So I'm just gonna skip through this. Okay, so now the financial section is all done, and then it'll bring you to the sign and submit page. It'll ask if you're a preparer or not. Preparers are very rare, but it would be, again, if you paid someone to help you do your FAFSA. First, it's going to have a little review page, so you can review how you answered the questions and see if you need to make any changes. And now here's the signature page. So we can see the student's signature is still needed and the parent's signature is still needed. So you'll click Provide Student Signature. You'll read this, agree to the terms, and then click Next. Sign this FAFSA for the student. They're already logged in with their FSA ID from the beginning, so they don't have to enter it twice. So now there's a little green check. The student has signed their FAFSA with their FSA ID. They're good to go. The parent signature is still needed, so we'll provide a parent signature. Read and agree. And now if the parent didn't use the IRS data retrieval tool and use their FSA ID already, they would have to enter it here at the end. So the parent's FSA username and password. And I think I said this, but only one parent needs to have an FSA ID. You don't need both parents to have it. And parent signature is completed, and so now you can submit your FAFSA. This is just another option, so if you were like, I don't want to sign it with my FSA ID, you can also print the signature page, sign it, and mail it in. Okay, so it's been submitted. It's going to give you a little congratulations notification. It's going to give you a confirmation number and a data release number that you don't necessarily need to do anything with, but it's there just in case. What happens next? You'll receive that student aid report, so you can review your FAFSA results, and the schools that you listed on your FAFSA will receive that data in 3 to 5 business days. Now, just because you guys can do your FAFSAs in October doesn't mean that schools can actually start awarding financial aid in October. We have to wait for government and state agencies to finalize their grant amounts, and different software systems get updated. So typically we don't start loading FAFSA data and sending out financial aid awards until late fall, early spring, so like December, January. Here is where it would show you, so you'd scroll down a little bit and it would say this is your expected family contribution number. So this one has a 0. You would open that up and it would tell you what your Pell Grant eligibility is. Okay, so that is a quick overview. Question? Yep.
What if you have 2 students? What's the process look like? You just do that twice?
Do it twice. You would use the same FSA ID. You don't need to have a different one for each student, but you'd have to, do it twice. And actually, I think they have a new feature now that's like, do you have another student in college that you want to just have your parent questions already answered in that FAFSA, and they can link it for you. That's new as well, so you could do that. Yes?
What you said about getting this, getting concerned over you said getting it done earlier is better. When you say earlier, are you talking about first of October? Are you talking that you get it done in October? I mean, what?
I'm talking in the fall, sometime like before February. So most families are able to get it done then, but we do have some stragglers. I've got some returners at Lakeland right now who still haven't done their FAFSA, and I'm like banging on their doors.
So I don't have to worry if I'm not going to get it this weekend.
No, just get it done before like Christmas is a good time. Yeah. Yes.
So again, for the second student, when they ask number in household, the student that's already in college, do you list them as part of your household, or what do you?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. Yeah. So if you're a family of 5, let's say, and you've got 3 children, and 2 of them are in college, it'd be a household size of 5 and 2 in college.
Okay.
Yes.
Questions about the website as we do it? I think I remember there's a facet that there's some kind of 800 number that you can call. I'm wondering, is there also like when we contact you, is there something local that we can use to contact if we have questions specific?
Someone local to contact with questions. You can contact us if you have questions. Because we do a lot of financial aid nights in the local communities, so we get parents or students calling and asking questions. You can, if you wanted to do it with us, we're happy to set up an appointment and have you and your student come, and we can do it with you. But yeah, if you are just doing it and you have a question, feel free to give us a call. I don't think that there's anyone else local that you could do it with. Or you could even call the colleges that your son or daughter is interested in, and they would be willing to help you as well.
Also, the program I sent along the flyers in the mailing that I sent out for Collegeville, Wisconsin, they actually do like sit-down stuff where you bring in all your information, they'll sit down with you and actually help you walk through the process too. So, I mean, that's another option if you're available on those evenings too.
Yeah, are you talking about the one in Manitowoc?
Yeah, there's one there, and then there's, I think, an Appleton one too.
Okay. Yep. I know for sure the Manitowoc one is October 17th. Any other questions? Otherwise, be happy to take questions up here at the end as well.
I will post Laura's PowerPoint also to the Student Services website, so you can find it on there as well. And then it was recorded as well, so I'll upload that as well.
Well, thank you everyone for coming and for your attention.